Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to I Care About You, the podcast where we deep dive into what it's like to be human on this planet at this moment and to be working towards our own growth and greater happiness. I'm your host, Juliana J, and today I'm going to share something deeply personal with you that came up for me recently. It's an intuition download. And I want to explore with you how judgment, especially towards those we love, can often be a mirror to our own shame, fear, and shadows. This is going to be a vulnerable conversation, I'm not going to lie. I share this not because I have all the answers, but because I'm walking the path of seeing things more clearly. And sometimes that means looking deeply at things that we might not want to look at. And I believe in the power of witnessing our shared human experience. Before we begin, I want to just tell you a little bit about our sponsors today. CozyEarth.com, get 41% off everything in the store when you use my promo code I Care About You. This store is loved by Oprah and Kris Jenner and has thousands of beautiful, beautiful products for bedding and PJs. There's also Zevo Life. Get 30% off using my promo code I Care About You at Zevo Life. Zevo Life, just a teaspoon a day, helps support your gut, hair, and nails, boosts your energy, promotes healthier skin and hair. It's really, really awesome. So check it out, and I'll put all of that in the show notes for you. So let's get into it. First, I want to talk about this intuition download I had about judgment and superiority. So not long ago, I received this inner knowing. When we judge others, it often comes from a place of wanting to feel superior. The judgment becomes kind of an armor. We point out others' flaws and their weaknesses and their shadows, and often unconsciously we're doing this to distract from what we don't want to see in our own lives. I felt this so clearly in my body that criticizing others, especially those closest to us, we inflate ourselves just enough to feel safer, stronger, and above them. And when someone sees our flaws, we fear that they will use them to make themselves feel bigger too. But what if underneath it all, they're also afraid and insecure and wounded and hiding from their shadows? Now, this really came up for me because as y'all know, I'm pretty honest and up there with what I'm struggling with, what I'm working on, what I have struggled with, and what I feel is triggering, and all these things about me. I'm a pretty open book because I think it's really important to show each other that we're all dealing with the same things on some level and that there's nothing wrong with anyone who's kind of going through it. So I try to be open about that. And I also think that sometimes being vulnerable with other people allows them to be vulnerable back or allows them to feel good about who they are and where they are in life and that they haven't figured it all out, right? So I'm pretty open with that. And I realized recently that somebody close to me is using that against me in a way, in that they're using it to make me lesser than. Knowing that when they make somebody lesser than, it's much easier to take advantage of them, to take from them, to do all kinds of things because now the person is lesser than. And that's really a whole bigger conversation about how we treat people who aren't like us, right? I'll get into those conversations about racism, sexism, marginalization, etc. And although it's easier to see when we are doing those things to the quote unquote others, but when we're doing it to our loved ones, sometimes it's not so easy to see. To just put some grounding with all this, I want to bring up a few psychological concepts that really resonate. One, projection. This is when we unconsciously attribute to someone else's feelings, traits, or impulses that we ourselves harbor, but we don't acknowledge. So when I judge someone as weak, perhaps inside I fear my own vulnerability and shame. The more judgmental we become, in many cases, the denser our shadow becomes. You can see this a lot where people will project something on someone else and you think as the third party, the person who's judging the other person, they kind of have those qualities too. It's just this projection that we do so we can hide ourselves a little bit more. Shadow work. This is a process of bringing into awareness all those parts of us we've repressed, denied, or disowned: the anger, the shame, the fear, the inertia, and learning to integrate them. It's only by shining a light on the shadow that judgment begins to loosen its grip. We also see that many of our judgments towards parents arise from childhood dynamics. We felt ashamed to be seen as weak or vulnerable or needy or not enough. Rather than sit with that shame, we unconsciously push it outward and blame and criticize and belittle so we don't have to feel it. So we just push it out to somebody else or something else. When I look back, I see moments when I did this to my parents, for sure, 100%. I so regret it and I wish I could do something about it, but I didn't really know I was doing it or wasn't aware that I was doing it until they were at the end of their lives, which is really sad. And I think a lot of people sort of find themselves in a place like this. I turned parts of their behavior into stories that I believed about them, stories that justified my own distance from them, my own shame, and my own attempts at superiority. And now I see these patterns echoed all around me in friendships, in the media, in news circles. I see it everywhere, and I feel it happening to me as well. So I want to just talk briefly about this judging parents and why we do that. Often we find ourselves judging our parents, calling them out for what they did or what they didn't do, belittling certain discussions, certain beliefs they have, criticizing their behavior. And part of me used to think it's about what they should have known or what they should have done, or they should have done this or that, or they're bad parents because of X, Y, and Z. But over time, I've seen how much of that judgment is really about me, about what I felt, what I needed, what I feared, and what part of me I didn't want exposed. Here are some of the reasons why we judge our parents, often unconsciously, and what is going on underneath. So, as I spoke about before, projection of our own shame, fears, and weakness. One of the biggest reasons is projection. When there are parts of ourselves that feel weak or unlovable, when we've grown up feeling insecure or ashamed or not enough, those parts get buried in the shadow. And we don't acknowledge them because, man, they hurt, right? They hurt because they threaten this image of ourselves that we're trying to be as grown-ups, let's say. So instead, those qualities feel safer when attributed to somebody else. My parents are always rigid or distant or harsh or controlling. These things we might also fear in us, but judging them becomes a way to create distance, to avoid seeing our reflection in them. Psychological projection helps protect the ego by shifting the attention away from the discomfort. This is really huge. We also do a lot of parent blaming. Instead of working on our own shadows or our own problems, regardless of what they're anchored to, we blame our parents for it. And when we do that, we can never get past that situation. When I blame my parents for things that happened in the past, that narrative has all of the power. But if I was to retell that story to myself in that, well, maybe my parents just didn't know what to do in that moment, or they were afraid or fearful, or they were dealing with their own shadows, or they had their own mental illness that they were dealing with, rather than my parents did this to me and now I'm this substandard thing as a consequence. If I'm going to take that stance that my parents should have done something different or been different or it's all their fault, I won't heal from it. Because ultimately, it's my responsibility how I am going to interact with that memory or situation that happened. Often we carry expectations of what parents should have done. They should have been supportive and nurturing and kind and emotionally available. And some of these expectations stem from our culture, from idealized ideas we absorb while we're growing up, from stories we tell ourselves about what everything should look like. When parents fall short of those ideals because, newsflash, they're human, which they inevitably do because they're human, because that's just how the world works, the gap between expectation and reality becomes a fertile ground for judgment. And we punish them, not for being human, but we punish them for what we needed, what we expected, what we wanted. We may not even consciously know what we needed. Perhaps just permission to be vulnerable or to show weakness or to be heard without being fixed. Also, sometimes we judge because we feel disappointed or even resentful that we didn't get something we think that others got. And that disappointment is painful, so judgment becomes a shield. I see this a lot where people judge their parents because of things other kids got when they were little that they didn't get. It could even be like toys and things like that, or they didn't feel like they had the same opportunities other people had, and they blame their parents rather than using their adult brains to go, well, maybe my parents just couldn't afford that, or they had different priorities or a different belief system. Or oftentimes your parents are very young when they have you, right, in their 20s. And when you think of yourself in your 20s, you realize that, wow, that's a really hard place to be responsible for somebody else's life. But we don't think about that. We just think these parents are supposed to do these perfect jobs. And when they don't do perfect jobs because it's impossible to do a perfect job, we end up being mad at them, use them as scapegoats, and judge them. Being vulnerable feels really risky and it feels unsafe. That's a lot of reasons why we go around judging people. If we allowed ourselves to be seen in all of our flaws, we worry someone might use that to hurt us or judge us. And in many cases, that someone is our parent or someone like them, an authority figure. So instead, we draw these boundaries, sometimes really harsh ones. We bring out judgment. It's a way to pull up walls and say, I'm separate and I'm above all of this. But in doing so, we cut off intimacy and possibility of understanding and reconciliation and seeing them and being seen in return. When we start to do all of that, we degrade the relationship we could have, and not just with parents, with anybody that you're judging as you're being above them or above this, or you wouldn't do that same thing. You honestly really don't know because you're not in their shoes. So you don't know if you would do the same thing or not, but you're doing that as a safety mechanism. So parents are often both the source of the transmitters of the general wounds, pain, unacknowledgement, even trauma. Some of these become internalized in us, shaping how we see relationships and attachment and love. Because those wounds are often never addressed, they live in a shadow. So when we see something in our parents that echoes those old wounds, we get triggered. We judge them for the way they acted, but also for the way that we were shaped by that. We judge to avoid feeling how deeply we were affected and how vulnerable we remain. And that is where the shadow work happens. If you can see that in the situation rather than judging the person and scorning them for it, if you can go deeper and see why that is triggering, why that is a situation, then you can work on that shadow and shift it and change it. Part of judging people is about proving that you're different, that you're better, that you're more conscious, that you're more spiritual, that you're more evolved. It's like saying, look what I see. I'm not them. I'm not like that. And we build our whole identity into contrast of what we perceive is the other person's or the parent or the boss or whomever. We may also judge them so we feel superior, because feeling superior temporarily lifts us out of shame and self-doubt. At least I'm not that way. At least I'm not them. But that lift is really fragile. It's really fragile and often comes with guilt or a sense of hollowness, because true confidence isn't about putting others down. This is a huge, huge takeaway. With all this judgment and everything, that's just a real temporary fix to make yourself feel better for a little bit of time. But the truth is, confidence isn't built on putting others down. It's built on working on these shadows and coming to terms with yourself and looking for self-worth and love and compassion and value. It's so much deeper. But it's harder work. So judging someone is so much more easier. From attachment theory, we know that the way we experienced our primary caregivers early in life shapes our eternal working model of relationships. How self we believe vulnerability is, how much love is given or withheld, how available others are, and importantly, how worthy we are. That's kind of what happens during this attachment situation. If our parents were inconsistent, if love felt conditional, or if vulnerability was met with shame or dismissal, we often grow up believing that we have to earn love. That weakness is dangerous. That being seen deeply could lead to hurt is really a barrier. These internal working models influence how we judge our parents and how, as adults, we judge ourselves. basically, at some point, it comes back to how you're judging yourself. And again, there's a retelling of the story. You're looking at it through the terms of a little child, but now you're an adult. You can pan away from it and look at it as human beings living life through the world, and that everyone makes mistakes or has bad times. I mean, I definitely came out of childhood feeling like I had to earn love. And it's not that my parents weren't loving per se or caring or gave me what I needed. It was small, well, not so small. It was a sexual assault that happened to me as a child and how it was handled that left me feeling that I have to earn love, I have to earn care, I have to earn people wanting to help me, and I can't count on anyone. And I took those with me throughout my life until I started looking at them as part of my shadows. I'm still working on it, but it's really hard to look at those things and see those things in yourself and to go, wow, here's something in here I don't really like. And instead of just judging everyone else, I need to go inward and look at what this really is. If you notice that you're judging your parents or your bosses or your caregivers or aunts or uncles or family members of any kind, pause and ask yourself, what part of me is being triggered? What wound or fear am I trying not to feel? What expectations did I carry with me that maybe were never realistic? And can I begin to hold space for these people that I'm judging, for the younger part of myself, for myself at this moment? How can I hold all of this with gentleness rather than condemnation? Because judgment is really condemnation. So, what is the cost of judgment and why does it matter? You might wonder, okay, but why care? What is the harm in judging? Isn't that how we figure out if something's good or bad or whatever? Isn't that just a natural way of being? Sure, yes, sometimes judgment, trying to decide, should I pick this apple or that apple to eat, is good, but it's not good as a blanket and all the time. And it's not good if you use it to not address things about yourself. For one, it alienates us. Judgment cuts us off from connection, especially intimate connections with those we love. It erects walls where openness could live. It keeps us small. As long as we're busy pointing out the flaws of others, we remain in the darkness about our own. And growth is stunted. It perpetuates cycles in families and relationships in society. Judgment about weakness or shame gets passed down generation by generation by generation. It breeds less compassion. You harden yourself off if you become super judgmental. We forget that we carry shadows too, and we forget how tender it is to be a human being, how hard it is to be a human being. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine. We've been both really going through it on different levels, and we just stopped and we're like, people just don't understand how fragile human beings are. I mean, we're tough cookies, right? We can do stuff when we need to do it. We can buck up and all of those things. But also, there is a real tenderness there that we don't often realize in each other because we're so busy judging. And myself included, I totally judge stuff, especially people who I feel wronged me. I'm really into judging people who feel wronged me. And I have to stop myself and look at, why would they do that to me? Is there some shadow that they're working with? Can I have compassion for them on some level? It's really hard work. It's really hard work. So how do you move forward? Seeing what there is there and not projecting. I don't want this conversation to just stay in the realm of insight. I want it to be actionable as well. So here are some practices, some that I'm actually using to help shift judgment towards clarity and integration. When judgment happens, pause and name the judgment. Notice when a thought arises like, you're weak, you're irresponsible, you're disappointing, and stop and ask, is that about them or is that something about me? When you get really agitated by something, immediately pissed, this conversation happened to me recently. I said something that was really, man, it took a lot of guts to get up to say, and it was a super vulnerable thing to say. And the person just met me with a wall of anger. And I was really taken aback because this person's very close to me. And I was like shocked. And I reflected on like, why would they do that? Why would they do of course, I went through this whole judgment crap. And then I realized I was doing that. And this situation that happened to me led to this epiphany that I'm talking about, or this intuition drop, this download that I got about judgment, because I felt definitely that I was judging, and then they were judging me so that I could be lesser, so that they could not address what I was talking about. And I was judging them so that I could feel better about myself because they were not hearing me. Once you've asked yourself those questions, feel into the emotion under the judgment. Usually it's fear, shame, loneliness, inadequacy. Let that feeling surface without suppressing it. This is really, really hard. But once you ask yourself, is this about me? You can allow what are those emotions that are associated with that. You don't have to trace it back to the moment you had the shadow, but you can think about all of the emotions that are around the shadow. And then ask, what would love want to see here? What would compassion want to see here? Instead of carving them into a fixed negative story, open your heart up and ask, what is this person struggling with? It's really hard to do that. But once you do it, it's hard to know to do that. But once you do it, it's really easy to see what they're struggling with because it's a mirror. You are also feeling it. If you think, oh, that person is feeling insecure, I'm feeling insecure. Oh, that person is feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling vulnerable. And own your part in it. If you see something in another that disturbs you, reflect. Do I believe the same about myself? Or do I fear believing it? Is that something I am also carrying around? Totally, because it's a mirror. Practice self-compassion and apology with those you've judged, including close family members. Sometimes a heartfelt apology or acknowledging helps clear away all that energy. When you go around judging everyone, you're creating all this energy that there's not a safe space. And then when you need the safe space, it won't be there. But also, people will not be as genuine and as deep with you. Your relationships will not be as deep as you want them to be because your energy is telling everybody it's not safe. And do regular shadow integration work. You can do this through journaling, therapy, inner child work, contemplative practices, whatever helps you meet your own darkness gently and steadily. But I caution you here to do your shadow work in a safe way that isn't triggering for you. And little bits and bites of it sometimes are better than just diving deep into it. You want to be careful and kind and compassionate with yourself when you do this work and seek help and support. To those listening, know this. You are not alone in having shadows. We all have shadows. You are not a bad person when you judge. We're all human. We all judge. It's a human characteristic. What matters is what you do with it when you see it. That's what matters. Your next steps. Today, I invite you to look back at a time when you judged someone close to you and ask, what was the story I told myself about that moment? What part of me was I hiding? And then, if you feel called, offer yourself compassion and begin to work on turning toward your shadow rather than projecting it. That's really important, very deep work, and you'll be a different person if you do it. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. It feels like you just open your world up so vast and wide, and it's really amazing once you can do it, but it's hard to start. That's the hardest part. Once you get in there, you'll see some challenging, hard, traumatic things too, and that's hard, but if you really do the shadow work and come out on the other side, it's such a relief. It's so amazing. And it gives you a better understanding of people and your relationships and your maintenance of your relationships. It's really important work. If you just stay in that place of judging all the time, you'll reinvent your reality to be something negative. And no one wants a negative reality. But that's normally what happens when you start judging and criticizing everything. You all know people who are really negative and all they do is judge and criticize. The whole conversations are all just judging and criticizing, especially now with all the political challenges that our country is facing. There's a lot of that happening, and it's hard. You don't want to be around those kind of people. So don't create that reality for yourself. And in closing, I want to thank you for sitting with me in this space. I know it was a challenging topic today, but it was very much on my mind and something I think that really has downgraded my life to be judgmental. And when people judge me, it's just a really horrible feeling. And I don't think we need to do that to each other. I think this is a time where we should be coming together and supporting one another rather than tearing each other down. I know that's become the way of being in the last 10 years, but is it serving us? I don't think so. And we can change that. So even if all you do is just recognize when you're judging people and try to be softer and more understanding, that's huge. So if this resonated with you, I welcome you to share with me your experience, your struggles, and your insights. You can do that through my website, which is always linked in the show notes, or you can leave a comment if you're watching or listening in some platform that allows you to do that. And I can bring it up in the next episode if somebody really comes up with something good. A lot of people send me their own experiences, their own stories. I sometimes put them in a newsletter. Sometimes they don't want to share it. They only want to share it with me. Sometimes there's really great advice that I will use for myself, or I will bring up in a newsletter or something of that nature. So please, your comments are very welcome, because this is a community here at I Care About You, and we're all in this together, and we're all helping each other out. So help us out. Tell us how you do it. How do you overcome judgment? How does judgment make you feel? What do you wish people would do differently? How do you change being so judgmental? Let me know. Let us know. We'd love to know, because I don't hold all the answers. All the answers lie with all of you. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who also might be able to use this information. And I'd love to explore how bearing witness to others' shadows can often soften our own, and how healing together changes how we show up in the world. And that is what this podcast is about. Healing together, changing the world. So until next time, my dear friend, know that I care about you deeply. I support you and I love you. And may we all learn to see more fully, love more generously, and release the urge to judge. And before I go, I'm going to leave you with one little affirmation I came across right after I had this download that I thought I must share with everybody. It was a sign. Here's the affirmation. I am allowed to be imperfect. I am allowed to be weak. I am human. And in my humanity, I find strength. So take good care, dear friend. See you next time.